So next I will cover a post that I made about the third seal and judgment in the Old Testament. So this was a post that I had made about, I believe these verses are from Micah. Israeli News Live he found apparently some verses in Micah, Micah chapter 6. I think earlier I had said Hosea 6, but that was actually Hosea chapter 1, I think. But I'll put some things on the screen so you guys can understand where I'm at. Um, Israeli News Live. I don't think he's following any theories or ideas. Any theories or ideas that we are in the black horse or at the third seal right now. But he does random Bible study programs. Sometimes I agree with him, sometimes I don't if I'm listening. But he had done one on the black horse rider, I think years ago even. He used he said he thought he found the third seal in the Old Testament. That makes me wonder because there's a lot that it looks like it to me too. So I'm wondering, are there other of the horsemen in the Old Testament, or like I said before, is the he comes into understandings. I'm not sure if I agree with them all, but I wonder because he's Hebrew. I'm wondering if he is gaining a spiritual understanding of something, and that's different. That's a little deeper than would maybe make sense to anybody. But he said the reason why he picked out Micah chapter 6 and the it being the third seal is he said he just knew, right? He understood. Maybe he has that spiritual gift, is that he understood that this is very interesting and timely. He understood that what this connected to him was the black horse and the third seal had to do with the temple of God and the temple being built or rebuilt. I don't know if he's getting that from other studies he's done and other books he's read or even books of the Bible. He didn't say it, but I'm going to read through it and see what you guys think about it too. But it's very interesting because would that be why the third seal and the black horse would be spelled out in the Old Testament is because that is the last one before, the number three is special, is that the last one before the temple is built or rebuilt. And another thing that it talked about too, and that it can be tied to with the temple, which is this is a very interesting about what's happened with me to the point that the whole reason I came back on my channel. And now I'm thinking that I may not be on here very often from here on. But guys, I haven't gone everywhere yet because I've been so busy, but I wanted to go all over the social medias. The main reason. I wanted to give you guys an itty bitty halfway decade update. And then I wanted to help this time instead of it being about narcissistic abuse, just generally, I wanted to start coaching and helping people because this is becoming an epidemic. And I'm wondering if this ties into this verses as well because of something that happened to me and someone in my family too, who I'm going to try not to out too hard to keep them private. Like I think the prophecy things run in our family for several things I've seen from my grandfather and my dad and everything, but and some of my siblings, but um the main thing that I wanted to share with you guys was to not be being tricked, especially the ones being abused, to not be being fooled and tricked by these wicked spiritual leaders that are taking over right now. They're everywhere. But the cool part is, like, I saw several people coming out and starting the movement, and I wanted to become part with them and share and just the coaching tips and how much these cults are exactly like a narcissist and how they're soul sucking and how to kind of get away from that. But I wanted to share these spiritual leaders in the church, in the churches, which I feel like a lot of that has been purified in the virus too. So a lot of them are like online or in the celebrated by the big entertainment systems and the big media systems. But kind of just how to recognize them, and mostly it's everywhere and it's in every denomination. how not to feel like, because it came from a pulpit, and at the same time, because they don't get obviously reprimanded, obviously shut down, obviously cursed, obviously punished, but you're being obviously punished, but they're not. All day long, does not mean that this is what God is and this is what God does. It turns so many people from God by design. And that's probably the same gaslighting that I just described to you about Israel. But um, that's the main reason I kind of came back. And I don't know if there's time or if I should do that or if I will. But that's what I wanted to do, and to get on all the platforms and be telling people like they're saying it's God doing it to you. And they're not getting justice in your face right now, obviously. It's everywhere. Because that was so powerful with the narcissistic abuse. Whenever you could go online and find the complete strangers telling your exact story, 50 of them, that helped a lot with the warfare in the mind and the spirit of the mind games. Where it was like, okay, this is so ridiculous. It's a whole movement. It's a whole movement. It's a whole movement of these abusers getting away with murder all the time, constantly. But the big gaslighting phase these days is the spiritual leadership, to where it's telling you constantly, a mind game constantly, that, and this is, oh my goodness, when I describe this to you guys, how interesting that it's in these verses talking about the third seal. Is the third seal the season of a lot to do with the temple and the house of God and these corruptions? Because I believe there are, this whole chapter it's talking about balances of it's talking about the balances. Thank you. A lot of times, whenever, and I don't fault people for doing this, but a lot of times whenever I'm going through the prophecies, I'm getting a lot of understanding, but I go through them quickly and I don't think about it again. Like my, even the dreams I have, I don't think about it again. I don't worry about it again. I get it. I get an understanding. A lot of times I understand that there's a lot more there, and half the time I don't even pray to God, Lord, give me all the understandings, because that's when it'll come. I don't. I kind of wait for the Lord to show me what I'm supposed to see. That way I know it's pure. That way I know I'm not inventing anything. I'm not coming up with stuff out of my own ideas. It has to be it has to be super. You don't hear me say, thus saith the Lord. You don't hear me say, God told me in an audible voice. Maybe he will. Sometimes he almost has. There's been a few times, and it's been very important when that happened. But a lot of times you're not going to see me say, and I bet you this means that, and I bet you that means that, and just come into all kind of leaps of conclusions. So therefore, in other words, by the time I get an understanding of something, it's pretty solid and it's based in connect. You can connect those dots really good, and there a lot of times there's a lot more, and I'll find out later. So when I do find out later, I know that that came from truth. That came from something that was really real, because I don't make these things up. I don't sit there and, in other words, I err on the side of not studying it enough and not looking into it enough. But it's great that people like Israeli News Live study it to the nth degree and go into all kind of Hebrew and stuff. It's so funny. Most of what he comes up with, I have no idea what he's talking about. It's so funny. But this was a post I made, Micah chapter 6. And he was saying, how very much like the third seal of Revelation that Micah 6 sounded. And there's other, I forget which Old Testament prophet, people call that the Old Testament Revelation, because it's so similar. It includes like the horsemen and everything. But the balances, that's what I was going to say. One of the things I had wondered, like as I studied these horsemen, like on my old channel, is I'm like, there's a lot more. I've always said, I have no idea what it really means when it's talking about touch not the oil and the wine. Does it mean these have to be rationed, but these are not going to be rationed? The wheat and the barley we're going to ration, the oil and wine are going to be fine. or the wheat and the barley crops are going to suffer in the weather, but the things that make the oil and the wine crops will be generally okay. I don't know what that means, but you can tell a lot of time. In other words, I'm not going to sit there and tell you guys, thus saith the Lord, invest in the oil fields, honey, because the touch not the oil. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to be honest and simple and just be like, I don't know. Maybe I will later. And then the parts about, I could always tell in the black horse and the third seal, there's other details and complexities to it that I don't understand yet, but I could tell there's more. I can tell there's more. And one of those things was the balances. When he's holding the balances, or I wondered if it wasn't just rationing with the scale. Was that also a big, deep, heavy weighing time for hearts and minds and spirits? It talks about balances in this chapter, and it talks about agriculture, oil, and wine in chapter 6. And the interesting part is the reason he linked it to the temple when he was teaching is these balances were weighing out what was happening in the church. And here it was, the biggest thing that hit me at this time was a wicked church leader. It's kind of like these things are being judged of what are the church leaders doing. And this is so interesting. Someone in my family, I think I can say it safely. Somebody in my family one time when we were taking care of Dad together, they told me, they said, you said that attack happened to you on 9/11 with a church thing. He said, I wonder if that had to do with my church thing. There is a wicked church leader. What they told me is they said there is a wicked church leader, and this is a community known thing too, that gave me so much headache and heartache and problem and difficulty. It was so hard and ridiculous for so long for that person, they said. And they finally ended up going to court over it. The wicked leader wound up going to court for something they were doing. And they actually got sentenced on 9/11 of 2020. He said, the wicked church leader that gave me so much angst for so long was sentenced on 9/11 of 2020 when you got hit by your wicked church leader attacking you. And I'm like, yeah, that's funny. I'm like, I can't put together, a real true connection to it right now. But it's kind of like it's saying that, yeah, when the guy hit me with this and he sold his soul to Satan, that was his sentence too. That was his exposure and what happened. So it was 9/11 of 2020 and this probably doesn't mean anything to strangers on the internet from what I'm saying, unless something like that happened to you. But in my own family, the coincidence of we're both very like this, like some of the most spiritual people in our family, and that person is named after a prophet, and they went through a whole lot, and they're saying 9/11. What is God saying there? And they could tell it was something. And I kind of blew it off at the time, and I need to go back to that person and tell them, yeah, that was something. I want to tell them in person, though. But in other words, that was a church leadership issue being judged in the balances. And so it's just all feels connected to me. I feel that. And you feel it probably more whenever you've been through so much. But um, so Israeli News Live, they point out it seemed like this chapter in Micah was speaking about the temple being built. And he wondered if the third seal had to do with the temple being built. And guys, when he did this video, he wasn't saying, I don't think he was even thinking we're at the third seal other than, they're looking at the temple right now. He had no other reason to say it, right? But I found it interesting because he wasn't even saying black horse, but he's associating it with it. And it's talking about the house of the wicked and sacrifices. Maybe he was just thinking of the desire that they have to build the temple, and what's the coincidence they're talking about black horse things right after they're talking about the temple things. But it's interesting too, that would be the third temple. 3, 3, and 3. The third seal, the third temple. They're discussing it a whole lot this past year, aren't they? But you see a lot of wicked celebrity style leaders, not just religious leaders, being exposed, revealed, and weighed right now. The attack that came to me, I believe, was signifying what I had been saying about the black horse, even before 2020, that it was coming soon. And it came directly from a wicked religious leader. And I've thought a lot about the prophetic relevance of the judgment beginning at the house of God. There's still a lot of like Christians who have been going to church for a long time that believe that we shouldn't, quote, judge anything that happens even at the church. And I was like, that is where you start. It's not to fault someone and to feel superior and to put them in their place and to be arrogant. It's the fear of God that if you allow certain things even up in the church house, punishment will come to us. You know, punishment will come on our house because we didn't divide and say that's wrong. It's even that. It's not about us, right? It's not about my opinion. It's just keeping the truth the truth. But it's about the nation being judged when the church has become so wicked. That's an interesting revelation. Are we at the third seal? And the churches are so wicked that our whole nation's about to be judged, right? But a lot of times, I was talking about this to somebody last night. There's been so many times in my life where I was accidentally used. I was trying to whisper my opinion about something terrible in the church to somebody. I was trying to be like, should I even say anything? And that's terrible. And that the whole conversation got right back to the people. And it's like, that's kind of like, don't whisper in the bedchamber, or a bird will carry the news. But it's kind of like that. But it's also, looking back, it's like, no, no, what I knew, and maybe even what my role to speak and say, that I wasn't being arrogant and selfish and headstrong to preach at these people. I was just like, oh my goodness, I better not speak to them because that's going to rock way too many boats. But it's kind of like everything I would come up with to say, the words that I was supposed to say was supposed to get exactly right back to those people, and it happened every time. And then when it brought the sword of the Lord properly to the situation. It's just crazy. But uh, how people react when you say the desperately needed truth in the church today, at least before the virus situation. And they think that I'm going way too far and saying way too much. But anyway, I have seen and heard many cases of these wicked celebrity and including celebrity, religious leaders, cult leaders, and evil. They're being exposed. They're being people are being having more of an understanding that they're to not be gaslit by the whole situation. Cultural things are being unveiled, even if it's a sham trial for ulterior purposes. And I've noticed a lot of parallels this time between this and what's happened to me. Complete strangers are saying the exact same thing. There's very edifying YouTube channels. Even if I never get around to doing it, if you guys are having issues with confusion about church issues and abuse by leadership, there's a lot of cool channels going on right now. A lot of people are coming out of these channels with complete individual dozens and dozens of good testimonies of how they got back into more truth and away from error, and they found the truth. And a lot of times that's how they get saved. A lot of times when these celebrities get exposed, or when you dare say the truth about what really happened, that's when people get very offended and angry because they're in a pride session of like a football team, a game of what team they were on, their ideas, or you're attacking an innocent person in their mind, and that makes everything more complicated, obviously. Some people know they're wrong. They're just upset now because they're getting called out. And so now they're going to be even super wrong in your face. This person in my family, we don't share the notes a whole lot about their spiritual views versus mine. But the few times I've heard them talk about it, they say very confirming things to me about the situation, and I believe I'm doing the same. It's like I say, it's really powerful whenever you're like, okay, we both went through the same thing. It's tracking, and it's given the same message. But one of the things they will say there is the people who adamantly support that evil person, no matter what evidence you bring, and refuse to do anything but stay there and support them to the max, are just as wrong as the person doing the thing. And that doesn't make me arrogant. That makes me fearful of, like, am I accidentally even doing that somewhere in my life too? But these are the kind of things that make people get downright dangerous, by the way, so be careful. But a lot of people are programmed for popularity contests and superficial side taking, and there's a lot of fear involved of doing anything differently. Pride is hurt, and they're not worried about being practical or realistic. And we all probably have issues with things like that. This gets into me, like when Jimmy Swaggart passed away in on Father's Day, and I think he was like a father figure to a lot of people. And I do have a sensitivity toward that, but also, in other words, I think we can have discussions of what's going on in the church. And in case you guys were not aware, there was a lot of error. There was just a lot of error going on with him in general. And I pray, Lord, I pray he's in heaven. I don't wish bad things at all. But, and I'm not saying the Lord took him home because he was in terrible error. Russ Dizdar passed before him, and I think Russ Dizdar was doing a whole lot of good service to the Lord. There's Bible verses about blessed are the ones who die in the Lord. But as much as just the times that we're in, and if you say the truth about, like, error that he was into, people get super, super offended. And it's a really good, the study of leaders like him and people who follow him with no repentance, like hardcore follow. That's a very interesting study of what it takes to not have any insight, to not be able to critically think. Does this even match the Bible? Does it go against the Bible? It's a good. I appreciate people who do the documentaries on the cults and things like that. Celebrity and being on television or the internet, it has like a certain level of potential corruption that we need to be careful about, or leaven. Um, Anything that elevates or lifts up, just be very careful with all of that and prayerful. Try to keep in mind an understanding of how it would be without that, how it is now and how it would be without that, of like maybe the humble state that the Lord wants to call people to. But a lot of people who are humble and very lowly, in different ways, sadly will be taken advantage of the most, because they are seeing all of these leaders as being the same way. Like, surely they didn't step into a leadership position because they really looked up to themselves and they really thought well of themselves. Surely they didn't step all the way up there because they think they belong there automatically, or they're out for a bad motive. Surely never, because I wouldn't do that. They might not even think those words, but it's just the way they feel about themselves, the way they feel about the world, and the way they feel about other people. If they're feeling that they're kind and sweet and giving to the max, then they're feeling that this other person is too. Surely. Surely, right? In psychology, that's called projection. But I believe the proper values in the church, for example, like the way the apostles would be, is that if Jimmy Swaggart actually ever truly had repented and been saved, he would know that he never belonged in a pulpit anywhere. And I'm only saying that because I think a lot of people agree with me anyway, but I'm only saying that because of the disparity. Where does this come from? The disparity between that fact, that understanding and truth, and how people hold him up so high. I mean, I can appreciate people um, being in organizations that are like-minded, to meet other like-minded people, to be able to build community and families, maybe. But even then, like, if you had a true understanding of the way things should be and how far a lot of things have drifted, That's one of the places you would stay away from. Nothing's perfect, for sure. But there's a fear to it too. But there's a lot of people that don't understand, and God does have mercy on people, because they just don't understand too. But he's a perfect sign of our time. This is sad. Him and what has happened with Jimmy Swaggart, even how who would have the audacity to write a whole Bible and to put their words in it, to put their words in a Bible and say you should read my Bible because it's like I have 3 times the words of the Holy Word. Just no, just everything off base, and people not being able to see it and feel it. I don't even see it and feel it deep enough. I'm just saying. Um, I'm sitting here preaching like, oh girl, y'all should be feeling all this, but I don't feel it enough either. I don't see it right either. But it's a perfect sign of like how far we have come. And a lot of these leaders too, I can see it in a lot of them. If they are really as humble as they should be, they would be sitting down, or at least willing to. And maybe some of his words, he said he was this way, I don't know. But they definitely wouldn't be asking for money, being out for name and money like that. But they would be sitting down, especially at least until they got some things right and knew it. I didn't even realize. I don't sit there and hound people and hate people for their past and what they've done. Somebody had to tell me and remind me that Jimmy Swaggart fell more than one time. I mean, just one time, all this would be true. But I mean, if you keep going back into the same error, and I have deeper ideas about that too, but if you keep going back, you really need to sit down from the pulpit and get saved. You need to get saved. And I understand people get caught up in life and get caught up in their. A lot of other people are depending on their leadership and whatever to a degree, but what that really you need to sit down not just to get saved, but to see if they're. This is sad. God has mercy on people that don't understand, y'all. But what we're seeing in a lot of these leadership positions are people are not even knowing how the ways that they have been taught are not even foundational. The traditions they were raised in that they praise and glorify so much are not even foundational. But a lot of these people don't, maybe to God's great mercy, they don't understand what foundational is. I don't feel like I do completely. They don't even understand that concept at all. And they're trying to have something right. It's sad. The foundational thing there, I would say some foundational things for a Jimmy Swaggart ministry would be have the fear of God where you don't write your own Bible and say it's the Bible and everybody should buy it for money. Foundational things is you don't collect all that money from people to run big systems that look glorified. I mean, God uses all kinds of things. I get it, but when it becomes about name and money and title and status, there's a lot of corruption there, and you'll know them by their fruits. But a foundational thing would be knowing the true Lord to the point where you stepping down from a pulpit is nothing. It means nothing. It's fine. Because he talks so much about the cross and putting God and the cross up high. But when you do that, you step down from, you at least honor the pulpit and leadership people enough to step down and say, something is so wrong here with a lot of this. A lot of the, like the charismatic traditions. That was some of those traditions are part of the spiritism that was moved in. That's drifting people away from truth more in more ways than any of us probably know. But that's probably enough on that. Enough to not go on and on. It's just what's going on in the church these days everywhere. Would not surprise me at all if he's in some kind of groups, came from groups or his family did, and he's a plant either. Because a lot of times it's going to be the last people you suspect. Your jaw would drop. You'd be like, no way. But the Bible says, by the way, evil men, evil people, and seducers will wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. There's usually, guys, depths of seduction to these people that's not just about, romantic seduction. There's depths of seduction going on there that is very subtle. And there's another verse about seducing spirits. It'll seduce you one way or another. those things are only going to become worse and worse. And you have to be so careful, because if you find yourself, the more you find yourself really liking a person, especially whenever there are shady parts to that, there's often a whole lot of deliberate or skilled, or that's part of the charisma and the charm and part of the error that's being used to deliberately have a whole nother side to that, where you don't look at the beautiful wine in the glass, you look at the snake that bites at the end, and their lips are like honey, but they are killer on the inside, and some of them pride themselves on that. But the last part of that verse is interesting. They're deceiving, and they're being deceived themselves. Because a lot of times, I've run into so many that last part of that verse is really called to my mind about they're being deceived. A lot of these people, especially in the time where we've lost more and more and more truth, is a lot of times what will trick us the most is they're convinced. What will trick us the most is they know, they're convinced. They really think it's that way. So there's got to be a lot of truth to it. But what's going on there is it's a system that's so deceptive. It's bigger than one person or a group of people. It's all so deceptive that the person doing it, and even they're given over, that's part of their judgment. They don't see it and they don't believe it. They can't see it themselves. Like the one who attacked me, I think they were raised up in a lot of error, just a lot of different kinds of error. Like if you say it with your mouth, it's gonna come true because God wants you to be God too. And there's I've seen him promote and endorse so many people that he even turned around and didn't promote later. Yet people have followed him like he's some kind of he's like some kind of bearer of all truth. Anything he says must be completely biblical and scriptural. And he hasn't even been sure himself, even in the few little times that I've known about him and things he said. But I believe he was raised in a time where he was shown, it seemed like his home life was rough, because people would say that, oh, feel so sad for him and give him whatever he says, because his dad never stood up for him and let him be a preacher or whatever. And so he had a rough home life, and it seemed like that the age he's stuck at, the toddler age, I think is about 6 years old. The only reason I say this is I studied enough psychology. I don't pin this on people and look for this in people until they come for me. Then I have a right to. Stuck at 6-year-old toddler phase, that's probably the age that his father really abused him or rejected him or hated him the first time, and he was abused, like arrested development or whatever, that he started noticing these other male figures to be like them, be worshipped like them, and mean something. Well, these other male figures were horrible, ravening wolves that worked miracles back in the day when these Antichrist spiritist movements were coming into the country. But I'm going to talk more about that later, how the main people that attacked me, and they seemed to attack me on these seal marks too. The other one did too. The two that I'm thinking of, one was the second seal. It was 2011 when they attacked me. That they both had these antichrist aspects real strong. But back to Micah 6 here. These people are deceived themselves, and that's what can make it so tricky.